Thanks, Mark.
MEDIAWATCH, of course. Reality TV practices under the spotlight after this tragedy in Argentina.
Right. 10 dead in Argentina, 2 helicopters that could collide.
3 French sports stars.
That's right, huge stars. And you can see here just one article that gives a sense of who these people are. There was a star swimmer, a star boxer, prominent French sailor, and they all perished in that very tragic collision in Argentina. Now, of course, the fact is that this was for a reality TV show, a Survivor-style show where it was called Dropped, as in being dropped from a helicopter, including these prominent athletes as competitors. But the problem is that the production company behind this show has already been involved in a series of controversies. And for example, a reality TV show that was put out on TV 2 years ago called Koh Lanta. One of the participants in this, again, you had to kind of try to survive in the wilds on an uninhabited island. He actually died as a result of participating in that show, and it created a huge amount of controversy. So again, now 10 people dying in this latest story. So a lot of people saying, are costs being cut in the making of kind of high-risk reality TV programs, and how dangerous is this? And the thing is, these programs are very, very lucrative, so there's a big drive on to cut costs, raise profits. For example, TF1, the network that this was broadcast for the Koh Lanta show that I just mentioned, it cost 12 million euros to produce and earned 25 million euros for the TF1 network in advertising revenue, which they can then redirect into, for example, news broadcasting, which is less lucrative, things like that. So some people saying really perhaps we need to look at these practices again, in particular at this production company ALP, which has been involved in 2 years now, within the space of 2 years, in 2 different incidents that led to deaths.
You were talking about the news. Let's talk about TF1. It's a French national broadcaster, of course. Let's talk about TF1's news coverage of this event. That's been criticised, has it not?
That's right. Now, it's a funny one because this show was being produced for the TF1 network, and then one of the anchor, the presenter of the show, who found himself in Argentina, then had to cover the story. Now, he was obviously in a very difficult position. Louis Baudin's his name. But on Twitter, there was a huge amount of criticism of the fact that he was doing this coverage on front of the crash site. Now, I suppose you can point to many other tragedies where people do live coverage from the site of the crash, but I think a lot of people felt that it was just a little bit too close to where the victims had indeed perished. Others saying, well, hold on a minute, we were playing in a loop the actual collision of the 2 helicopters, and isn't this in the nature of television news to show you what's actually happening and to go to the site of where it happened? But it did create a lot of conversation on social media and on media generally, Mark, about the nature of the coverage of this kind of story, in particularly because it was a reality TV show, and the drama around the show had a kind of almost a reality TV aspect to it. So I suppose it did lead to a lot of those questions being asked, and a certain amount of criticism of that. The French media were also mentioning the incident after the Malaysia Airlines crash in Ukraine, where a Sky News reporter ended up going through the personal belongings of the crash victims. Now, he himself later made a public apology for that, saying that he was very moved by the scene and he just was under pressure to, I suppose, provide constant coverage. So, Mark, I suppose the spotlight on reality TV, also on TV generally, and I suppose the borders or the red lines for good taste in this kind of a story where this.
Some people say, James, the TV you get is a TV that the public demands. That's another thing to consider too. Now, let's move on to your next story. The French Justice Minister Christiane Taubira. I remember this. She was called a monkey by an opposition politician, a far-right National Front politician. Disgraceful. She's admitted to crying in private because of these repeated insults she's received from opposition politicians.
That's right. It's a very complex one, but just in relation to what you just mentioned, that incident there, Mark, this is an article from the New Yorker magazine going back to 2013, The Justice Minister and the Banana, How Racist is France? Now, she has been the subject of racist comments by the far right. There was one incident here in relation to the banana where a 12-year-old girl brandished a banana at a public protest against gay marriage legislation that she was spearheading, this in 2013. It was just one of a number of racist incidents going back to that time. Now, the latest story that's getting a degree of coverage in this regard is a UMP, so a centre-right politician, deputy mayor of a Paris suburb. Let me try to find the right article here. She said you should go back to Cayenne. Now that's in French Guiana, where she is originally from, which is a part of France. But it was a comment that has been broadly interpreted as being derogatory and racist. There was also an incident going back a couple of weeks ago where another MP said that she's a walking advertisement for the far right, in the sense that she's for criminal reform of the prison system. She was in favour of gay marriage. She's seen as a very left-wing candidate in the government and as a target of attacks again and again and again.
Regardless of any of that, these kind of racist insults just are inexcusable.
Absolutely.
Inexcusable.
And I suppose what's got a lot of coverage today is she spoke to RTL Radio this morning and said that actually, even though she hasn't admitted to this before, these comments do affect her, and that she has on occasion cried in the privacy of her bedroom as a result of that. So it is, it's getting to her. That's for sure.
We are not surprised. James, for Media Watch, thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Kate Moody with The Business.